The Mafia boss walked into the green room looking for a cufflink box and found his assistant with her sunglasses off for the first time in 14 months. Alessandro Conti opened the wrong door at exactly 6:52 p.m., and the first thing he saw was not the woman he had spent a year training himself not to watch too closely, but the truth she had been hiding behind designer frames since the week she came back from maternity leave with a new last name and an old kind of fear. Grace Ferrara stood at the mirror in the private prep room of the Conti Foundation gala, a concealer brush frozen halfway to her cheekbone, her sunglasses folded on the counter in front of her, instead of on her face where they belonged. Her left eye was swollen at the outer corner, the skin beneath it a deep, unmistakable violet, fading to sick yellow at the edges, the kind of bruise that took more than 1 week to build and more than one excuse to explain. Alessandro stopped as if someone had drawn a weapon between them. Grace froze. Her eyes met his through the mirror, wide, caught, ashamed in a way that had nothing to do with vanity. Not because he'd seen her without the glasses, because he'd seen what the glasses were for. "Forgive me," he said, voice low and controlled, one hand still on the door handle, his face angling instinctively toward the hallway. "I was told my cufflinks were left in here." Behind him, he heard the soft click of the sunglasses case snapping shut. "It's fine, Mr. Conti. I should have locked the door." He didn't look back. He kept his eyes fixed on the dark paneling of the hallway, his jaw tight enough to ache. Downstairs, the ballroom was already filling with donors, city council members, family court judges, and men who owed him favors and smiled like friends. In 30 minutes, he was supposed to stand on stage and present the Conti Foundation's largest grant to date, seed funding for an affordable housing initiative built to keep at-risk families out of the system entirely. In 40 minutes, the guest of honor, the Honorable Marcus Wade, would accept the city's Family Preservation Champion Award, flanked by cameras, with Grace standing exactly 2 feet to his left. Because that was the custody arrangement, and custody arrangements did not care what a judge did to the mother of his daughter behind closed doors. Alessandro had known that last part for 11 months. He had told himself it changed nothing. She was his assistant. She had a daughter. She had a legal document binding her to civility with a man who terrified her. Alessandro Conti did not reach for women bound to someone else's paperwork. No matter how often his eyes found her before his mind gave him permission, no matter how many times her quiet competence had turned his office from a war room into the one place in his day that felt like it had rules he actually respected. But now he had seen her eye. Now every boundary he had built between himself and Grace Ferrara felt like paper standing too close to a match. "I walked into a cabinet door," Grace said from behind him. The lie came fast, clean, rehearsed. Alessandro's hand tightened on the frame. "Cabinet doors don't leave a print the shape of a knuckle." Silence. He could hear the faint hum of the building's climate system, the distant warm-up of a string quartet 2 floors below, the soft rasp of Grace's sleeve as she reapplied concealer with a hand that wasn't quite steady. "Please don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Look at me like it costs you something." The sentence cut deeper than she'd meant it to. Alessandro closed his eyes for half a second. For 14 months, he had never once crossed a line with her. Not when she stayed past 9, rewriting his correspondence, because she noticed the version he'd sent that morning sounded too much like his father. Not when she left protein bars in his desk drawer during acquisition weeks because she'd clocked, without being told, that he forgot to eat when he was angry. Not when he quietly moved a security detail 2 blocks from her apartment building after a break-in on her street that she never reported to him directly. Not when she wore sunglasses indoors, starting the week she came back from leave, and he told himself it was a stylistic choice. A woman reclaiming a little armor after childbirth, because the alternative had been unbearable to consider. He had never told her that the sound of her heels in the hallway before 8 a.m. did more to settle him than anything his therapist had ever billed him for. He had never told her that he still had the umbrella she'd left in his car 8 months ago, the one with the cartoon bee print, folded in his bottom desk drawer, because returning it would have required explaining why he'd noticed it was hers in the first place. He had never told her that the day she came back from leave wearing a wedding band for a marriage. No one at the office had been invited to. He had canceled 2 meetings and stood at his window for 40 minutes, furious at a city that had let this happen without asking him first. He had said nothing because she deserved a version of freedom his world made almost impossible to guarantee. "It does," Alessandro said. The words escaped before he could stop them. Behind him, Grace went still. When she finally spoke, her voice had rebuilt itself into the one he knew from 9 to 5, controlled, professional, distant. "The gala starts in 28 minutes. Your remarks are on the podium." Judge Wade's office confirmed he wants the housing video to play before his acceptance speech, not after. Alessandro almost laughed at the cruelty of the timing. She was bruised, frightened, half-finished with her makeup in a room he'd walked into by accident, and she was still managing his schedule. Grace. "Mr. Conti? Who did this?" "No one you can touch. Try me." She turned fully then, sunglasses back on now, the concealer doing its careful, imperfect work beneath the tinted lenses. She looked composed. She looked exhausted underneath the composure in a way that only someone who had spent a year memorizing her face would have caught. "You can't punish him," she said quietly. "He's downstairs, about to be honored by your own foundation." Alessandro didn't move. He didn't need to ask. He already knew. Marcus Wade, family court judge, silver-tonged and camera-ready. The man-house custody ruling gave Grace 50% time with her own daughter and gave Wade 100% leverage over every hour of it. "Did he do this?" Alessandro asked. Grace's mouth tightened. "I have work to do." She tried to step past him. He didn't block her. He wasn't going to become another locked door in her life. But he spoke before she reached the hallway. "If you walk out there tonight and let him touch you in front of cameras, I won't stop you." She paused. "Thank you. But I will find out what he's holding over you." Her shoulders stiffened. No. The word came sharp, panicked, nothing like the careful assistant voice from a moment ago. "You can't investigate a sitting judge." "I can investigate anyone." "Not him." "Why?" Grace turned back, and for 1 second the mask cracked so completely, Alessandro saw the woman underneath it, tired, cornered, still protecting someone else before herself. "Because if Marcus loses his seat," she said, "he takes Lily." Alessandro's anger didn't flare. It concentrated, went cold, went precise. "Explain." Grace shook her head then, seeing that he wasn't going to move, gave it to him anyway, low and fast, like tearing off a bandage before she lost her nerve. "He controls the custody calendar through his own courtroom's scheduling clerk. He controls the family court evaluator who reviews me every 6 months. If I embarrass him, if I leave him publicly, if I so much as file a complaint, he doesn't need to hit me again. He just needs to tell the evaluator I'm unstable, unreliable, difficult to co-parent with. And a 5-year-old's whole life gets rearranged around a lie no judge above him will ever question because judges protect judges." "He told you that?" Her laugh was thin, hollow, not like a villain in a movie. Men like Marcus don't threaten loudly. He says things like, "Custody evaluations are complicated, Grace." He says, "It would be a shame if Lily's stability became a talking point." He says, "You know how these things look on paper." Alessandro looked down the hallway toward the gold-lit stairs leading to the ballroom floor. "And you married him for this?" "I married him because I believed the version of him from before Lily was born. I stayed because leaving costs me my daughter, not because I love him." Her voice cracked, just once, before she caught it. "That is not a marriage. Neither is pretending a black eye is a cabinet door while sending my daughter's father a birthday card because the court likes co-parenting to look friendly." The words struck them both silent. Grace looked briefly shocked she'd said them out loud. Alessandro's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. There it was, finally, alive between them, the thing they had spent 14 months feeding with careful silence. "I cared too much," Alessandro said, "to make you another woman trapped by a powerful man's paperwork." Her eyes shone behind the tinted lenses. "And I was already trapped by one." The elevator chimed at the end of the hall. Voices rose from the private access corridor. Grace wiped her expression clean in an instant, so fast it broke something loose in him. "Please," she said, "tonight let me do my job." "Your job is not standing next to a man who hurts you." "Tonight it is. Because he thinks he's already won this custody cycle. That makes him careless." Before Alessandro could ask what that meant, the doors opened and Diane Whitfield swept into the corridor in emerald silk, the smile of a woman who collected powerful men like art pinned to her face. She chaired the Family Preservation Fund, the charity co-hosting tonight's ceremony, and Marcus Wade's most useful public shield. Her assistant hovered behind her with a tablet, the same young woman who had spilled sparkling water down Grace's blazer 15 minutes earlier in the lobby. "Alessandro," Diane said warmly, her eyes flicking first to Grace, then to the closed prep room door behind them. "There you are. The donors are getting restless. Marcus is asking for Grace." Grace's fingers curled once at her side. Alessandro noticed. Of course he did. Diane noticed him noticing and smiled wider. "Is everything all right?" "Perfectly," Grace said before Alessandro could answer. "I'll bring the judge to the stage." Diane's gaze dropped briefly to the sunglasses. "Good. He prefers you visible during public moments. It photographs better." The sentence looked harmless. It sounded like poison. Grace nodded and walked ahead. Alessandro watched her go, every protective instinct in him straining against the leash of strategy. Diane lingered. "She's fragile," she said lightly. "Brilliant assistant, of course, but emotional since the divorce filing stalled. Marcus has been very patient with her." Alessandro looked at her. "Has he?" "You know how women can be coming out of a difficult marriage, grateful for stability one moment, resentful the next. He nearly lost his license over the Delgado custody case. Careful how you use the word patient around me, Diane." Her smile stiffened. "Of what?" "Speaking to me as if you confuse control with concern." He left her there and entered the ballroom. Conti Tower's grand hall glittered under chandeliers and camera flashes. White orchids climbed the columns. A quartet played near a fountain of donated champagne. Screens along the walls displayed families in new housing, children smiling in classrooms, the Family Preservation Fund's careful, curated proof that money and mercy were the same thing here. Near the stage, Marcus Wade stood surrounded by donors, silver-templed, courtroom handsome, his tailored suit doing exactly what it was built to do. He looked like a man designed by the city's need for a hero who also understood paperwork. When Grace approached him, his smile softened publicly. Privately, his hand found the small of her back and pressed, index finger curling in exactly the spot where Alessandro would learn. Later, 3 older bruises had already faded to yellow. Grace's mouth didn't move, but Alessandro saw the tiny hitch in her breathing from across the room. Marcus leaned down and kissed her cheek for the cameras. "There you are. You changed the concealer brand. It's obvious." His voice, pitched only for her, carried none of the warmth on his face. "The lighting in here is unforgiving." "Careful with unforgiving, Grace. People are watching." "I know." "Good girl." Alessandro didn't hear it from across the room, but he saw Marcus's mouth form the words, and something rose behind his ribs that felt very much like violence dressed in a tuxedo. Silvio Ricci appeared at his side, broad-shouldered, unreadable, 15 years loyal. "Boss." I need everything on Judge Marcus Wade. Every case he's presided over involving the Family Preservation Fund, every scheduling clerk in his courtroom, every custody evaluator who's touched Grace Ferrara's file. Silvio's gaze flicked toward the stage. Family court judge. Careful. That's federal territory the second you touch a sealed record. Then be quiet about it. And if he's clean... Alessandro watched Marcus's hand slide from Grace's back to her elbow, guiding her toward the front row like property being repositioned. He isn't. Silvio left. Alessandro moved through the crowd, accepting handshakes, declining conversations, letting old men praise the Conti Foundation's generosity while his attention stayed locked on Grace. He watched how she stood beside Marcus with perfect posture, how she smiled at donors' small talk, how she angled her body a fraction away from his hand without ever making it obvious. He watched Marcus perform tenderness for the cameras and apply quiet pressure the second they turned away. The performance was flawless. That was what made it monstrous. On stage, Diane introduced the evening in soft, practiced tones. Hope, family, second chances, children lifted out of the system by generosity. Then she invited Marcus up. Applause swelled. He took Grace's hand and drew her up beside him. She didn't resist. Alessandro saw the hesitation she swallowed, the courage it took to stand under bright lights next to the man who had marked her face and controlled her daughter's calendar with a scheduling clerk's signature. Every child deserves stability, Marcus began. Every family deserves a second chance. Grace's face stayed composed, but Alessandro caught the flicker of pain behind it. Some of you know my work through the bench. Tonight I want to honor the person who taught me the private meaning of family. My co-parent and partner in every sense that matters, Grace Ferrara. Applause. Cameras turned. Grace's fingers tightened around the program card in her hand. When Grace and I built a life together, Marcus continued, she was carrying more than most people ever. See, I was humbled by her resilience, and I am grateful every day that the court allows us to raise our daughter with the closeness a family deserves. Alessandro's jaw hardened. Grace's smile didn't reach her eyes. She looked like a woman being buried under compliments engineered for an audience that would never ask a single hard question. Then Grace did something almost too small to notice. She clicked the pen in her free hand twice, paused, clicked it once more. Alessandro had seen her do that exactly once before during a zoning negotiation when she'd caught two versions of a filing with mismatched page counts. It was her silent signal for discrepancy. His eyes moved to the screen behind her, where the donor scroll for the Family Preservation Fund played on a loop. One name appeared twice, spelled almost identitrust. Wade Family TRVST, a shell variation, not a typo. Grace had found something. Marcus finished to thunderous applause. Grace stepped down first, and Alessandro met her near the side corridor before Marcus could reclaim her. The duplicate name, he said. Her lips barely moved. You saw it. Tell me. Not here. Grace. She glanced toward Marcus, shaking hands with a city councilman. Wade Family TRVST isn't a donor. It's a shell account tied to the fund's foster placement stipends. The misspelled version shows up in 3 internal disbursement logs I wasn't supposed to have access to. Alessandro's eyes sharpened. How do you know that? Because I copied the logs. He stared at her. The woman he'd thought was trapped had been moving through her cage with a blade hidden in her sleeve the entire time. When? 4 nights ago. Her voice dropped. That's when the eye happened. Alessandro's control thinned to a wire. You have proof? Partial. Not enough. He caught me before I finished the archive. Where is it? Not with me. He knows I have something. He doesn't know how much. Tonight, after the acceptance speech, he's logging into the fund's board tablet to show donors a projected impact chart. That tablet has the original disbursement records, real numbers, kids' names attached to stipends that never reached them. Alessandro understood before she finished. Funds diverted. Grace nodded. Foster stipends redirected through shell accounts back to a real estate holding company, Marcus quietly co-owns. Lily's custody file is flagged compliance sensitive under his signature, which means any judge who reviews it defers to him automatically. The word compliance landed like a blade. Before Alessandro could answer, Marcus appeared behind her. "There you are?" Grace turned. Marcus smiled at Alessandro as if nothing in the world could touch him. "Mr. Conti, generous foundation, you honor the bench tonight." Alessandro's gaze held his. "Do I? The fund will be grateful for years." Marcus's hand drifted toward Grace's back. Alessandro stepped, not quite between them, just enough that Marcus's hand stopped in the air. The temperature in the corridor changed. "Your remarks were moving," Alessandro said. "Family preservation is powerful work. It's a calling, not a business. Everything is a business to men who keep dockets." Marcus's fingers curled at his side. "You'd know more about ledgers than I do." Alessandro almost smiled. "Yes." Diane approached quickly, sensing the edge without understanding the cause. "Gentlemen, the impact presentation is starting. Marcus, the board wants you at the tablet table." Marcus looked at Grace. "Come with me." It sounded like a request. It was not. Grace hesitated one heartbeat. Alessandro saw it. Marcus saw Alessandro see it. Something moved through the judge's polished face like a crack under glass. "Unless Mr. Conti needs you," Marcus added softly. Grace's eyes lowered. "I'll come." She walked away with him. Alessandro watched them go, then found Silvio near the projection booth. "You were right." "How bad?" Two custody evaluators resigned in 3 years after complaints that never reached the state bar. One court clerk took an unexplained cash deposit the same week she rescheduled Grace Ferrara's evaluation twice. 3 foster families accused the fund of changing stipend disbursements after they questioned the paperwork, all buried. By Diane? Diane signed off on every internal review dismissal. And Lily's file? Silvio hesitated. Flagged compliance sensitive, tied directly to Wade. Reviewed quarterly. There's a note attached. Alessandro's jaw didn't move. "Say it." Co-parent cooperation essential to continued custodial stability. The words were dressed like family law. They smelled like extortion. "Get into the board tablet's archive," Alessandro said. "We need access while he's logged in." Grace already knows that. "She told you?" "She's been fighting him longer than we have." "Then we follow her lead." At the presentation table, Marcus unlocked the fund's board tablet with a passcode and thumbprint, smiling as donors leaned in to see projected impact numbers. Grace stood close enough to watch, close enough to tremble, close enough to be punished for the wrong kind of stillness. Alessandro watched her hands. She picked up the guest ledger's silver pen and clicked it twice, paused, 3 times. It looked like nerves, it wasn't. Alessandro turned to Silvio. 213. Silvio relayed it to Marco in security. 30 seconds later, his phone buzzed. "We're in the outer layer." Something like pride cut through Alessandro's rage. Grace had given them the first door. Across the room, Marcus's posture changed. A notification had appeared on the tablet, small, invisible to anyone who wasn't watching for it. His head rose slowly and his gaze found Grace. For the first time all evening, the saint looked at her like the man underneath had forgotten the cameras. Grace went pale. Marcus smiled again, but this smile was for her alone, and it promised consequences. He leaned close to her ear. Alessandro read his lips from across the room. "What did you do?" Grace didn't answer. Marcus's fingers closed around her wrist, lightly enough for the crowd, hard enough for her bones. Alessandro moved. Silvio caught his arm. "Boss, not yet." "He's touching her." And Marco's inside the server. 30 seconds. Those 30 seconds stretched like years. Marcus kept smiling at donors while holding Grace's wrist. She didn't cry out. She didn't pull away. She looked across the room at Alessandro and gave the smallest shake of her head. Not yet. She was telling him not yet. He hated her courage because it required her pain. Marco's message arrived. Inside, downloading. Then the ballroom screens went black. A murmur moved through the crowd. Diane snapped at a technician. Marcus released Grace's wrist and looked toward the projection booth. Then a new image appeared on every screen. Security footage. Grace entering a restricted records office at night. Grace removing a flash drive from a locked drawer. Grace transferring funds into an account under her own name. Gasps rose around the ballroom. Diane turned with practiced horror. Oh my God! Marcus stepped back from Grace as if wounded by betrayal, his performance beginning instantly. Grace, tell me this isn't true. Grace stared at the screen, stunned. The footage was real enough to be dangerous and false enough to destroy her. She had entered the office, yes, but the transfer was fake. The drawer was staged, the timestamps altered. Marcus had prepared this. He had known she might try something, and he'd built a trap inside her escape. Donners whispered. Board members stared. A councilman's face hardened. Diane moved toward Grace, voice low and cold. Messrs. Ferrara, you need to come with me before this becomes uglier. Marcus reached for the microphone with the sorrowful expression of a man forced to expose the woman he'd once claimed to love. Ladies and gentlemen, please. Grace has been under extraordinary strain since our divorce filing. The stress of shared custody, certain obsessive attachments she's formed at work. His eyes flicked to Alessandro just long enough for the room to feel the implication. I had hoped to handle this privately. Grace's face drained of color. This was her nightmare. Not that he would hurt her privately, but that the truth would come out of her mouth and he would make the world call her unstable before the first sentence finished landing. She accessed sealed custody adjacent records and moved funds through accounts linked to her name. Marcus continued, voice rich with fabricated grief. I believe she needs help, not condemnation. The crowd murmured with pity now, and pity was worse than hatred because it did not listen. Alessandro stepped forward. The room quieted before he reached the stage. Marcus turned to him with a sad smile. Alessandro, I know this is uncomfortable. She works for you. Perhaps you missed the signs those of us close to the family have been managing for some time. Alessandro took the microphone from his hand, not aggressively, not dramatically, simply held out his hand, and Marcus, conditioned by a room that expected powerful men to cooperate in public, released it. Alessandro looked at Grace first, not with pity, with certainty. Then he turned to the crowd. Judge Wade is right about one thing, he said. This has been managed for some time. Marcus's smile faltered, but not by Grace Ferrara. The ballroom went silent. Diane's expression sharpened. Marcus's eyes cooled. Someone prepared this accusation before tonight, Alessandro said, gaze fixed on the frozen screen. Someone expected Miss Ferrara to become inconvenient. Someone needed all of you to believe she was unstable before you asked why a family court judge's own assistant knew enough to threaten his bench, his fund, and his custody file. Marcus laughed softly. That's a serious claim. Then be careful how many lies you tell while my people trace the source. For the first time, fear flickered across Marcus Wade's perfect face. Silvio appeared near the projection booth, phone to his ear, and gave one sharp nod. The trace had found something. Grace saw it too. Relief nearly buckled her knees, but then Marcus moved, not toward Alessandro, toward her, fast enough to look like concern, hard enough that she knew what was coming. His hand closed around her bruised wrist in front of everyone. Grace? His teeth stayed clenched around a smile. Come with me now? Pain flashed up her arm. Alessandro's voice cut through the room. Let her go. Marcus's grip tightened. She's my daughter's mother. Grace lifted her head. Something changed in her face. The fear didn't vanish, but it stopped leading. She looked at Marcus, at the man who had used her daughter, her fear, her silence, her injuries, and her own devotion to a 5-year-old against her. And then she looked at Alessandro, not for rescue, for permission to stop pretending. Alessandro saw the question and answered it without a word. He stepped back half a pace. He gave her the stage. Grace took the microphone from his hand and spoke, her voice shaking but alive. "No, I'm not standing here because I chose to co-parent gracefully. I'm standing here because you made my daughter's custody schedule the price of my silence." A sound moved through the crowd. Marcus's hand froze on her wrist. "And I'm not unstable," Grace continued. "I'm not confused, and I am not stealing from your fund. I found the files you buried. I found the stipends you redirected. I found the families the money never reached. And 4 nights ago, when you caught me copying the proof, you gave me this." She reached up and removed her sunglasses in front of 200 witnesses, the fading bruise visible under the chandelier light for the first time all evening. "Then you told me no one would believe an assistant over a family court judge." Marcus's face twisted. "Enough!" He yanked her wrist. Alessandro caught his hand. Clean, controlled, final. Marcus tried to pull free. Alessandro's grip didn't move. The entire ballroom watched the judge's mask crack. Alessandro leaned in, voice low enough that only the first rows heard every word. "You will never touch her again." Then the screens changed. The doctored footage disappeared. In its place, a family court file marked Ferrara, Lily. Beneath it, co-parent cooperation essential to continued custodial stability. Then another file, stipend disbursements, shell account routing, custody evaluator sign-offs dismissed by Diane Whitfield's office. Names, dates, signatures. The ballroom erupted. Diane shouted for the screens to be cut. The councilman stood. Marcus stared at the evidence, then at Grace, hatred bare now. "You stupid woman," he hissed. "You think this saves you custody? You think a scandal helps Lily?" Grace's lips parted, but before she could answer, Silvio's voice came through Alessandro's earpiece, low and urgent. "Boss, there's an emergency pickup order flagged at Lily's after-school program. A car's already en route with Wade's Chambers credentials." Alessandro's blood turned to ice. Grace saw the change in his face and knew instantly. "Lily," she whispered. Marcus smiled. Not the public smile, the real one. Grace didn't scream. The sound that left her was smaller than a scream. And worse, the kind of broken breath a person makes when fear runs too deep for the body to know what to do with it. "Lily," she whispered again. And the chandeliers, the donors, the cameras, the champagne, all of it disappeared from her mind as if none of it had ever mattered. Alessandro heard Silvio a second time, sharper. "Pickup order says the mother is under investigation for theft and instability. They're trying to move her before you can stop it." Grace stepped backward, nearly tripping off the edge of the stage. Marcus's smile widened by a fraction, small enough that most of the room missed it. Alessandro didn't, neither did Grace. That smile told her everything. This had never been only about the bruises, the gala, or the files. Marcus had built a cage with more than one lock, and Lily had always been the final one. Alessandro released Marcus's wrist slowly, not because he was finished with him, but because Grace was already moving. She pushed past Diane, past 2 stunned board members, past a donor asking if she was all right. She was not all right. She had not been all right in a year, but she could run. "Grace!" Marcus called after her, voice still wearing concern for the crowd. "You're not thinking clearly." Alessandro turned to him, and for the first time that evening, the polished judge took one step back. "Say her name again," Alessandro said, "and I will forget how many cameras are in this room. Threatening a sitting judge won't save the girl." The microphone was still live. The sentence carried through the ballroom. Every whisper died. Marcus realized it too late. Grace stopped near the side exit, one hand on the doorframe, and looked back. The whole room looked at Marcus now, not as a champion of families, but as a man who had just called his own daughter leverage in front of 200 witnesses. Diane's face went pale. The councilman swore under his breath. Alessandro's eyes stayed on Marcus. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That was the first honest thing you've said all night." Then he turned to Silvio. "Lock the building. No one leaves with a phone wiped, a tablet broken, or a file deleted." Send every screen recording to the district attorney's office and to Judge Ferris in family court oversight now." Marcus's expression shifted at the name. "Ferris has no authority to touch a colleague's ruling." "He does now." "You'd be amazed what doors open when a city realizes its family court champion is about to become a national scandal." Grace couldn't wait another second. She ran into the private corridor. Alessandro followed. Behind them, the ballroom exploded into chaos, but he didn't look back. Power meant nothing if it arrived too late. The private elevator took 19 seconds. Grace counted everyone like a prayer. Her borrowed phone shook in her hand as she called the after-school program. No answer. She called again. Nothing. The doors opened, and she rushed in, Alessandro behind her, Silvio entering last with his phone against his ear. "Security is delaying the pickup," Silvio said. "But the order is real, signed under Wade's Chambers authority. Says the mother is under active investigation and the child needs protective transfer pending review." Grace turned so fast her hair struck her shoulder. "He can do that?" "He already did. But they haven't left the building yet." The elevator descended. Grace pressed both hands to her mouth. Alessandro stood beside her, close but not touching. That restraint nearly destroyed her. If he had grabbed her, she could have fought it. If he had told her to calm down, she could have hated him. Instead, he simply stood there, ready, terrifyingly still, letting her fear exist without trying to own it. "Grace?" he said. She shook her head. "Don't. If he touches her, he will not leave that building with your daughter." Her laugh came out like pain. "You don't understand? Marcus doesn't have to touch her. He signs an order. He calls it protective custody. He tells the school director I'm unstable, and suddenly I'm outside a locked classroom begging to see the only person who's ever needed me. Then tonight, we take his signature out of the system. You can't fix a year in one night." "No," Alessandro said, "but I can make sure he never gets another night." The elevator opened into the garage. 3 black cars waited. Grace moved toward the nearest one, knees nearly giving out. Alessandro reached instinctively, then stopped. "May I?" The question landed in the middle of the emergency like a hand held over a wound. Grace looked at him, breathing hard, then nodded. He put one arm around her carefully, supporting without pulling her into him, and guided her into the car. Silvio took the front seat. The driver pulled out before the door fully closed. The city blurred outside the windows, silver and black and cold. Grace kept calling the school. Still nothing. Then her phone buzzed with a video call from an unknown number, and she answered so fast she nearly dropped it. Lily's face filled the screen, pale, frightened, a stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, the one Grace had bought her the week they moved into the new apartment alone. Voices argued somewhere behind her. "Mommy?" she whispered. Grace's heart cracked. "Baby, where's Ms. Owens?" "They said I have to go with the lady with the folder. She said you did something bad and Daddy has to keep me safe." Alessandro's hand curled into a fist on his knee. Grace forced her voice soft. "Listen to me. You did nothing wrong and I did nothing wrong. Don't sign anything. Don't let anyone hold your hand out the door unless Miss Owens is right there, okay? Do you remember our rule? If someone says I sent them, they need to know the words." Lily's lips trembled. "Purple elephant?" "That's right. Did anyone say purple elephant?" She shook her head. "Then they're not for me." Some strength returned to her small face. "Okay." The video shook as someone entered the room. A woman's voice said, "Lily, sweetheart, we need to get you ready to go." Lily looked off screen. "Do you know the words?" Silence. The woman said, less sweetly, "Give me the phone." Lily pulled it to her chest. Grace sat forward. "Do not touch her." The woman appeared on camera, polished, holding a lanyard and irritation disguised as concern. "Mrs. Ferrara, you're currently under review pending an active investigation. Judge Wade has ordered a protective transfer. That is my daughter, and until any status is legally clarified, no one moves her without my consent. Her father's chambers has authorized." Alessandro leaned into frame. "What's your name?" the woman faltered. "I'm sorry, who is this?" "The man whose security team is recording this call, whose attorneys are 4 minutes from your program director, and whose contact at the district attorney's office is already reviewing the order you're holding." Her expression changed. "Step away from the child, please. I'm following procedure." "No," Alessandro said. "You're following a judge who was just recorded threatening his own 5-year-old in front of 200 witnesses. Step away." She looked off-screen. More voices. Then the video shifted as Lily whispered, "Mommy, Miss Owens is here." Relief hit Grace so hard she nearly sobbed. Miss Owens appeared, a tall woman with steady eyes and the expression of someone with no patience left for powerful men playing games with children. "Mrs. Ferrara," she said firmly, "I'm with Lily. No one is moving her without a court order. I can verify myself." Grace covered her mouth. "Thank you. Get here safely." The call ended. Grace bent forward, shaking. Alessandro wanted to touch her hair, her shoulder, anything to tell her she wasn't alone, but he didn't. He looked at Silvio instead. "Where is Wade?" Left the ballroom through the service hall. Diane delayed security. "He's headed to the school." "Of course he is," Grace whispered. Alessandro turned to her. "Why would he go himself?" She wiped her face, and when she looked up, her fear had sharpened into understanding. "Because the pickup failed. Lily's the last thing he still controls. If he can get to her, he can still force me to recant." "Would you?" Grace looked out at the city lights. "Yesterday, yes." His chest tightened. "And tonight?" Her voice came back stronger. "Tonight he made the mistake of threatening my daughter in front of 200 witnesses and a live microphone." At the school, the lobby was in controlled chaos. 2 security guards stood near the entrance. A program administrator argued with Silvio's men and was losing. Grace stepped out of the car before it fully stopped. Alessandro moved with her. Every eye turned toward them, and Grace hated the way people looked at her now, not as a mother, but as the center of a scandal. "Head up," Alessandro said softly. "You have nothing to be ashamed of." "Easy for you to say. No, necessary for you to hear." They reached the classroom hallway just as Marcus walked in from the opposite entrance, his tuxedo jacket gone, his smile returned, his smaller. Now, private stripped of cameras. 2 of the after-school program's own security officers trailed him uncertainly. He looked at Grace first, not Alessandro. "You've caused quite a night." Grace kept walking until Alessandro's hand, not touching her, merely hovering near her back, reminded her she didn't need to run at him to win. She stopped 10 feet away. "Stay away from her," Marcus said. "Still making demands you don't have the standing to enforce." "I do. You're not her guardian. She is, and she's currently implicated in theft." Grace's voice shook but didn't break. "Files that prove you stole from the fund meant to keep families like ours together." Marcus smiled. "Allegations. Stolen data. Emotional testimony from a woman under obvious distress." He looked down at her wrist. "No one will believe I hurt you after tonight. They'll believe you hurt yourself to build a story that keeps my daughter." Alessandro took 1 step. Grace raised her hand, not to stop Marcus, to stop him. She looked at Marcus, and for the first time since Alessandro had known her, she didn't look like someone trying to survive the room. She looked like someone taking it back. "You always loved that word," she said. "Distress. It made everything I felt sound unreliable." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Careful." "No. You're going to listen." Her voice steadied with every sentence. "You used Lily because you knew I would let you hurt me before I let you hurt her. You used the fund's families because desperate people are too grateful to question your numbers. You used donors because guilt pays better than justice. And you used me because a devoted co-parent made your custody optics look flawless." A muscle moved in Marcus's jaw. "I gave you a family. You gave me fear and called it stability. Without me, you wouldn't have a custodial narrative to run a state Supreme Court campaign on." For the first time, Marcus lost control in front of the program staff. "You ungrateful." He reached for her. Alessandro caught his wrist before his fingers touched her. Faster than thought, controlled. No crack of bone, no public brutality. Just the undeniable fact that Marcus Wade's hand would go no farther. "I warned you once," Alessandro said. Down the hall, a voice cut through the tension. "Judge Wade." Everyone turned. Assistant District Attorney Renata Ossi walked toward them with a leather bag in one hand and a tablet in the other. Calm, sharp-eyed, wearing the expression that reminded rooms full of powerful men that they were not in fact the highest authority present. Marcus's face changed immediately. "Renata, you have no jurisdiction here." "Emergency review, authorized by the program director 4 minutes ago." She held up the tablet, and before you threaten anyone, she signed it while watching a live feed of you threatening a 5-year-old's caretaker. The gray-suited administrator looked ready to sink into the floor. Marcus's voice lowered. "This is a family matter." Ossi looked at Grace's bruised wrist, then at the classroom door, then back to Marcus. "It stopped being a family matter when a child's welfare file was flagged compliance sensitive under your own signature." A murmur moved through the hallway. Marcus's eyes flicked toward the exit. Silvio blocked the path. "Running. I'm calling my attorney." "Good," Alessandro said. "Find one who reads fast." Ossi turned to Grace. "I reviewed Lily's custody file on the way here. 2 of your requested evaluation dates were pushed without cause after you missed fund events he required you to attend. That ends tonight. I'm recommending immediate transfer of the custody review to an independent judge outside this district." Grace stared at her. "You can do that?" "With what I've seen tonight, yes. It will not be simple, but he will not control your daughter's file again." Marcus laughed once, ugly and short. "You think Conti money makes this clean? The bar will fight it. The fund will deny everything. And you, Grace, will be remembered as the unstable ex-wife who used a Mafia boss to attack a sitting judge." The hallway went silent. Alessandro's face darkened, but Grace stepped forward before he could speak. She reached up and took off the sunglasses she'd put back on in the car, folded them slowly, and set them on the reception desk beside her. "I didn't use anyone," she said. "I worked. I endured. I stayed quiet because I thought silence was the price of keeping my daughter. And I loved someone I thought I could never choose, because choosing him would make you punish her." Marcus's eyes sharpened. Alessandro stopped breathing. "Yes," Grace said, softer now, not fully facing him, because if she did, she might lose her nerve. "I loved him. Before tonight. Before he saw my eye. Before he knew anything. Because he never made me feel small for being careful. Because he kept an umbrella in his car for 8 months and pretended he forgot it was mine. Because he never asked for more than I could give." Marcus stared at them both with hatred. "How touching!" Grace looked back at him. "And I stayed with you because you held Lily's schedule in one hand and my reputation in the other. That was never a marriage. That was a hostage negotiation with a custody calendar attached." She pushed the folded sunglasses another inch across the desk, a small final gesture. "I'm done." Marcus lunged for her or for the glasses, no one knew which. Silvio moved first, catching him by the arms and turning him hard against the wall. Marcus cursed, struggling, until program security finally found the courage to help. "You can't do this," Marcus shouted. "I am a sitting judge." Ossi's voice was flat, not for much longer. Investigators arrived 9 minutes later, not with sirens, with badges, sealed evidence bags, and the quiet efficiency of people who had been waiting for the right file to open the right door. Alessandro hadn't invented the case from nothing. Marcus's history had existed for years, evaluators silenced, families priced out. One clerk who disappeared from the courthouse after asking too many questions about the fund. What Alessandro had done was connect it, protect it, and make sure the proof reached daylight before morning. Diane Whitfield was taken aside in the school lobby after the trace led back to her office's sign-offs. She didn't scream. She simply went gray and said, "Do you understand what this will do to the fund?" Grace, standing near the classroom door with Lily now asleep against her shoulder, answered before Alessandro could. Maybe it will make it a fund again. Diane looked at her with resentment, then something almost like shame. You don't know how many families depend on a program like this staying quiet. I know how many children didn't get the money it was supposed to protect them with. That ended the conversation. Marcus was escorted past them in handcuffs, still trying to stand tall, still trying to make disgrace look temporary. When he passed Grace, he stopped, the agents holding him, and leaned close enough to speak. "He won't keep you," he whispered. "Men like Conti don't love women like you. They protect broken things until they get bored of the project." For 1 second, the old poison searched for a way back into her blood. Then Alessandro spoke behind her. "Grace." She turned. He wasn't looking at Marcus. He was looking at her. "Do not let a man in handcuffs tell you what freedom looks like." Marcus's face twisted as the agents pulled him away. The elevator doors closed on him, and for the first time in a year, Grace took a breath that didn't belong to fear. Lily woke fully back at the apartment, tired but bright-eyed, the stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. "Is Daddy mad?" she asked. Grace sat beside her on the bed and took her hand. "Yes." "At me?" "Never at you." Lily looked past her at Alessandro, standing respectfully near the door. "Is he the umbrella man?" Grace froze. Alessandro's eyebrow lifted slightly. "The what?" Lily smiled sleepily. "Mommy keeps an umbrella in his car and says it's a work thing, but work things don't have a B on them." Grace closed her eyes. "Lily!" Alessandro's mouth curved, the first real, almost smile of the night. "Your daughter is very observant. Apparently, so is her mother's cover story." Lily studied him with a seriousness that made her look older than 5. "Do you like her?" Grace made a choking sound. "Lily Ferrara." Alessandro didn't laugh. He walked closer, stopping at the foot of the bed. "Yes," he said, "very much." Lily nodded, as if confirming a suspicion. "Good. She needs someone who doesn't make her wear sunglasses inside." The simplicity of it nearly undid Grace. "You're giving permission now?" "Somebody has to," Lily said, already half asleep again. Alessandro sat in the chair on the other side of the bed, not near enough to crowd Grace, close enough to be present. For a while there was only the quiet hum of the apartment, and the soft, even sound of a child finally sleeping without fear in the next breath. At 3 in the morning, Lily was fully asleep. Grace stepped into the hallway, exhausted beyond tears. Alessandro followed after a moment. The building had gone quiet, washed in the pale blue of a streetlight through the window. Grace leaned against the wall. "I don't know what happens now," she said. Alessandro stood beside her, leaving space. "Now you sleep." "After that?" "After that, Lily's custody review moves to an independent judge. Marcus faces what he did. Diane and the fund answer for what they hid." "And me?" He looked at her. "You choose." She gave a tired laugh. "That sounds generous." "It isn't generosity, it's repair." "Repair for what?" "For every powerful man who made your choices feel like a trick." Grace's eyes filled, "Including you?" The question was quiet but brave. Alessandro took it like he deserved it. "If I ever do, yes." She looked down the hall toward Lily's room. "I can't go from Marcus's version of a family straight into yours." "I know. People will say I used you to win a custody fight. People say many things when the truth makes them uncomfortable. You don't care? I care what you believe." She finally looked at him. "What if I don't know yet?" His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. "Then I wait." "Alessandro, I loved you enough to stay silent when I thought silence. Protected you," he said. "Now I'll love you enough to wait until your choice is free of everyone else's leverage." Grace pressed her lips together as tears slipped down her face. This time she didn't hide them. She was too tired to perform strength and too free, suddenly, to apologize for being wounded. Alessandro lifted his hand slightly, stopping before touching her cheek. "May I?" She closed her eyes and nodded. His thumb brushed one tear away, gentle as a promise he had no right to make yet. The touch was small. It shook them both. Morning came pale and cold over the city. By then, Marcus Wade's face was on every local news screen, no longer framed by words like champion or hero, but by indictment, custody fraud, and misuse of a family court seat. Alessandro made sure Grace didn't see the worst of it, not because he thought her fragile, but because she had earned a few hours where Marcus's name wasn't the loudest thing in her life. Lily was safe. The independent judge had already granted an emergency stay on the custody calendar. Ms. Owens sent a note that said only, "Proud of your girl," and Grace didn't know if she meant Lily or herself and decided it didn't matter. At 8, Alessandro's driver took Grace home to change while he stayed with Lily, sworn to strict instructions about the pudding cup in the fridge that was, apparently, hers alone. Grace went home and stood in her small apartment for 15 minutes without moving. Marcus's fingerprints were everywhere once she knew how to look: the framed engagement photo, the coat he'd chosen because he hated the one she'd bought herself, the custody binder full of evaluation forms. She filled a trash bag slowly, not in rage, in release. At the bottom of her desk drawer, she found the first note Alessandro had ever left her, written on a meeting agenda the week she'd skipped lunch during an acquisition. "Eat before the board eats you alive. AC." She had kept it folded behind her passport for 11 months. She touched the paper once, then placed it in her bag. When she returned to Conti Tower that afternoon, the ballroom sat empty below, flowers wilting, banners with Marcus's name already gone, workers moving silently through the wreckage of the night before. Grace rode the private elevator to the executive floor in a plain gray sweater, no sunglasses, no concealer over the fading bruise near her temple, because she no longer had the strength or the shame to hide it. Alessandro's office door was closed. On his desk waiting for her sat a white envelope with her name on it. Inside was a resignation letter, already written, already dated, unsigned. Beneath it, a note in his handwriting. "If staying feels like another cage, leave. If leaving feels like fear, stay. Either way, choose for yourself." Grace read it twice. Then she sat in his chair, took his pen, and wrote one line at the bottom. She folded it, placed it back in the envelope, and left it in the center of his desk. Alessandro returned 10 minutes later and found her gone. For one terrible second, the air left him. He opened the envelope slowly, already preparing himself to accept the first choice she had made freely, even if it took her away from him. The resignation letter was blank, except for the line she'd written. "Coffee at 8, no locked doors, and no sunglasses." Alessandro stared at it, and something in his chest that had been clenched for a year finally loosened. The next morning, at exactly 8, Grace stood outside his office holding 2 coffees. She didn't knock at first. Through the glass wall, Alessandro saw her and rose immediately. He reached for the door, then stopped, waited. Grace noticed. A small smile touched her mouth. Tired but real, she knocked once. "Come in," he said from inside. She shook her head no. His brows lifted. She held his coffee up. "You come out." For a moment, the most dangerous man in the city stood in the center of the office, where men twice his size had learned to fear him. Then Alessandro Conti smiled, opened the door, and stepped into the hallway where she could decide whether to meet him halfway. Grace handed him the coffee. Their fingers brushed. Neither rushed, neither claimed. Behind them, the city kept moving, headlines kept breaking, enemies kept calling, and Lily texted Grace a photo of her untouched pudding cup with the warning, "Tell the umbrella man I'm watching him." Grace laughed. Alessandro looked at her as if that sound was worth every war waiting outside the glass. For months, Marcus Wade had taught her that love was a locked calendar, a signed order, a hand on her wrist, a threat dressed as co-parenting. Alessandro did not ask her to walk into his room. He walked out of it. And for the first time in her life, Grace Ferrara understood that the safest door was not the one a powerful man opened for her. It was the one he waited outside until she took her sunglasses off and chose to open it herself.